while you were working on the resource, what did you envision? Like, what did you vision? Like, what did you hope that this would become?
I didn't, I knew that it was something big, and that it wasn't about us, it was bigger than us. And it was our honor and our responsibility to do the work justice. And I know that's something that Sarah and I kept focusing on. Like, this isn't about, like, this is an honor to do this for representation, to share our stories, to educate, to I guess provide legitimate resources to get it. I hate to say this, to get it right. That's not exactly, because there's so many different ways, but yeah, in a sense, to avoid miscommunication, miseducation, resources that are, riddled with racist underlining tones and false information. Like, this was lived experience. These were, people who knew their stuff, Omayra and Cheryl, and that we could bring something of value to the table. And also, for the little kid in us that didn't get to have that Black teacher, that didn't get to see themselves represented, to be the cheerleader when we got to use this resource in our own classrooms. And I know Sarah will speak to this, when our friends and our community started reaching out. I'll let Sarah talk to that, because that's more her story, just how far it went. Yeah, Sarah, I really want you to speak to that, because a lot of that came from you.
Well, it was wild because the summer that we were working on it is the summer that I made a career transition to a new role. Like I mentioned, I'm now the educator in residence at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. So I didn't get to see this piece of work, this body of work in action. I was only hopeful that by spreading the word here and there, someone might use it, someone might pull a lesson. And Natasha and I, it was a labor of love over that summer. It was 3 weeks of, like I said, there were phone calls and Zoom calls and text messages and edits. And it was just an ongoing back and forth between us of, how is this going to look in a kindergarten classroom? What about a ninth grade social studies class? And to think about the lessons we were creating coming from the lenses that we come from, me being upper elementary, her being junior high, predominantly, it was one of those, like, are we doing this right? Are we disservicing anyone? Because the worst thing as a teacher is to pull out a guide thinking this is going to be great for my grade 1 art class and have nothing to support. So by doing all that work and really leaning on each other for that, the hope was we're going to push out this resource and hopefully it'll work. And the reach that it's had has been so incredible. And like Natasha said, one of the most affirming things is having some of my closest peers, some mentor teachers, people that I consider brilliant in this field of education, reach out to say, hey, you did good, kid, is one of those things. As a 33-year-old, I am still so in awe and shock and just very humbled at the fact that there are people using something that we wrote. And it's one of our main resources now on the Canadian Museum for Human Rights website. We talk about Black on the Prairies, and this experience has helped me to realize and reaffirm for me what is it to be Black on the Prairies. And when I look at little Sarah, or my younger students, my students when I taught them in grade 3, they're now in grade 10, and to have my students reach out and say, I heard you made this activity with one of your friends. That's so cool, Miss A. It's just the most wild thing to me that we did this a couple of years ago and it still has reach, and it's beyond Black History Month at this point. Teachers in June are asking, hey, that art lesson about this thing, how would you use it? Or the lessons that you wrote with Natasha about music, if I'm using it in my 4th grade music class, how would you do it? So to have teachers reach out and want support is just one of the coolest things ever.
Thanks, Sarah. Omayra or Cheryl, either of you, would you like to share your vision that you had for this project?
This makes me very emotional, I have to say, because this was the vision. This was exactly the vision. The vision was to um, bring our stories to the world. And I could do it from the space that I was operating in, and I'm operating in as a CBC journalist. But I couldn't do it alone. And so the advisory board was important, and having Cheryl was important. And so fundamental to anchor us in knowledge, to anchor us in reality. And I'll just say something so simple. Saying that Black people have been on the prairies for more than 200 years sounds so simple and benign. But at the time before we did the project, it wasn't like as all over the place as it is right now. You know, it was knowledge that was in books that historians have researched. If you were very well versed in it, you knew about it. But we were able to bring fundamental needed information into the public sphere, and that was the vision. And the public sphere, to me, the schools are so fundamental. And the collaboration with Sarah and Natasha was so needed. To me, that was the vision. How to change Canada, how to change our understanding of who we are as a country. That was the vision behind the project. And so that's why we thought about it from so many different angles. It wasn't enough to just have a few stories on TV or on the radio and call it a day. We had to really think about how we could, have impact on many levels, different levels. So I'm just incredibly grateful for this moment, for having Natasha and Sarah, two brilliant Black teachers on the prairies, and obviously Cheryl, and now the Saskatchewan teachers. Is just such a deep and important moment. It's legacy work, it really is.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Omayra. Cheryl?
It's so great to hear it from so many different perspectives, to hear the vision for this work. I hope that I get to live in a Canada where everyone has an understanding of Canada through my eyes. I happen to know that there is no part of this country that does not have Black history. Every part of this country has Black history. And so the way I've started framing it lately, because I'm working on a project with Heritage Park in Calgary, which is kind of a giant theme park for those who don't know, who it sort of tells the story of southern Alberta and the prairies in, with buildings and kind of through the creation of an old-timey village. And one of the things I'm having the opportunity to help them understand in the park is that the absence of representation of Black history in the park is harmful, and it's also just deeply wrong in the sense that it's not accurate. So what I've been able to help them understand is that there is direct Black history in the park, right? There are several sites where I can say, in this building, these Black people lived and worked. In this building, John Ware married his wife, Mildred Lewis, and their first child was born in that building. In this building, there were at least 4 Black fur traders who, a lot of the buildings are recreations, but some of the buildings are legitimately held the breath and the footsteps of Black people going back, as Omayra says, 200 years on the prairies. So there's that direct history. Then there's also what I call adjacent Black history, where I know there was Black presence in that particular building because I know the Black people who were living in that tiny little Alberta town, and for sure would have gone to that ice cream parlor. And so, although I don't have any stories to share, I don't have a memoir where they said, yesterday I took my, great uncle who visited from X to the ice cream parlor. I know that there is Black history there, and I call that adjacent Black history. But I also know that I can assume, just because of my knowledge, that there is Black history in every part of that little recreated historical village, for reasons like my uncle's family lived in the town of Barons during those years, 70 years ago, and I know they played pool, so I can assume they played pool in the snooker hall that's represented there. So what I want to shift in the way Canadians think is, instead of assuming there was not Black presence, which is, unfortunately, that is how Canadians see our country, we assume there was not Black presence, and that is dead wrong. I want Canadians of every race to see this country the way I see it, to see it through my eyes, and to just know that there is Black presence and history everywhere in this country. So that's my vision. Black on the Prairies is a big part of that vision and what I see as the potential for that shift in the way that we think about our country to happen.
If I may, I was also thinking that a lot of the history that is taught in our schools is American Black history. We look at things like MLK Day, we look at things like Juneteenth, and those aren't necessarily Canadian or parts of our Canadian history. And so having Cheryl's expertise and knowledge and the whole premise of this that Omayra's created has allowed Natasha and I to create a resource that focuses on Canadian Black history. And that is, growing up, I learned all about Martin Luther King Jr. I think we all did, but he's not a Canadian. So to learn about some of our greats, our people, the people in our nation who grew up in our communities, I think that is even more meaningful. And for me, that vision comes to life when people like Natasha are in her classroom and are able to use the lessons that she darn well created to be able to help her students understand themselves and their peers.